I'm Jake Aaron Villarreal, born and raised in Silicon Valley, and here to take you behind the scenes to share what it's like to be a startup founder, the journey they're on, the problems they face, the products they build to help transform industries. I'm excited to have with us today Jeu George, co-founder and CEO of Orkes, a $29 million venture-backed startup. Jeu, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jake, thanks for having me on the show. Excited to be here.
Great. Well, I'm excited to have you. Where are you calling in from today?
I'm here in the Bay Area. I live in Cupertino, so in the heart of the Silicon Valley.
I love it. I'm from there too, and not originally from where I live today, which is in Southern California, but um, the pulse of technology is where we see a lot of innovation continue to happen and come out of. So I know you're in the right spot. Let me give the listeners a little bit more background of you. So Ju is the co-founder and CEO of Orkes. He's also an alum of Netflix engineering, where he was involved in the Conductor project and is now the most popular orchestration and application platform in the market, used by over 3,000 enterprise clients worldwide. Shu also previously worked at Microsoft and Uber while co-founding the company pinkvilla.com, the world's largest and most popular Bollywood news and media website. You've got a lot of great companies in your background, and we'll talk a little bit about those. But before we dive into your current company, Orcus, give us a little bit more about you and your origin story. Where did you start? Where did this all kind of play out to get into the technology world?
Yeah, so Jake, so I grew up in India, southern part of India, and I come from a mechanical engineering background. And through that, I also got a chance to intern early on at the Indian Space Research Organization, where I first got introduced to programming at an enterprise at a company level. And that's where my love for computers and programming started. And later on, I came here to the US to do my master's. And after that, I got a chance to join Microsoft. This was like, pre-cloud era, right? And I got a chance to work on the Windows operating system. Later on, went to work in the Microsoft Office organizations. And after my stint at Microsoft, that was back in Seattle. So I wanted to move to the Bay Area, and then, came here back in, you know, early 2010, 2011. That's around the time. I think late 2011 was when I moved here. Got a chance to work in Netflix back when DVD was still a thing, and that's where it all started. But going back, the entrepreneurial bug was always in me, and I was lucky to have done this once before in the consumer space. But my love for enterprises and the things that is being done in enterprises, being a developer myself for several years, but finding this great idea and problem space that I was truly passionate about, and a great team to actually get together and work with, that has really helped this journey, right? So, and I'm grateful to whatever has happened before, and excited for what's in front of us.
Yeah. Well, when I grew up in San Jose, California, it was shortly after I left, went off to college and came back, and Netflix was already, the DVD mail out subscription service, which was, banner ads all over the internet. And then eventually got into the streaming that we all love and know today. Um, what a great story Netflix is. And to be part of that was amazing. Walk me through a little bit about what your role was at Netflix and how did it really kind of give you insights about the roadmap for what you eventually built yourself?
Yeah, so I started as an engineer at Netflix, and being like an individual contributor at Netflix, I think I spent around 7, 8 years there, right? But one of the great things about working at Netflix, I think one is obviously the technology. Like, we know how great of a company Netflix has been, and 200-300 million subscribers that they have around the world in the streaming space. But some of the great learnings, like from an engineering standpoint, we kind of revolutionized cloud computing, right? And being part of the journey, other companies never have, kind of done this before, and the challenges were interesting and new. Netflix was also the very first company of its size to operate completely in the cloud, right? So, and some of the challenges as early adopters, that also led to kind of creation of Conductor, right? But some of the other big learnings from Netflix, and these are things that we apply to Orcus as well, is the culture that they built. That was a unique culture in the valley. A lot of things that came out of Netflix, 10 years later, other companies started to adopt it, right? Like, and so that culture, having the right set of people, being lean and mean, having that sense of ownership, right? This whole culture of freedom and responsibility, it's hard to kind of look at it and fathom how this can really help the company from the outside. But having lived and breathing this, like day in day out for like 7 8 years, like that's really helped, not only helped me grow as a person, but also technical skills, and been able to take all of that and apply it to kind of building Orcus as well.
Well, you look at Netflix and you say cloud computing. At that time, cloud computing was kind of nebulous. Not a lot of companies even knew what it was.
Yeah.
What was the partnership that really got cloud computing off the ground for Netflix?
So this was, I think, so Netflix, so AWS first came out with this thing called the cloud, right? Like, I think that this term cloud wasn't even popular then. I think this category was still getting created. In a way, Amazon also was lucky because there was no, I think, like a direct competitor to the cloud for what, 6 7 years after AWS was initially launched. But one of the things that AWS also needed as a company was a great tech forward company, something that is has a great brand name, and also getting them to use the cloud and operate completely in the cloud. So that partnership, that early partnership between Amazon and Netflix, was very critical to both companies. One, in the way that Netflix grew and was able to do a lot of things at high velocity, but also to Amazon, because now when you have some company like Netflix go and operate completely in the cloud, like every company can look at that and say, hey, if Netflix can do it and they can run their entire business on this, any company can, right? So that partnership was very very critical for both companies, right? And and everyone who worked in Netflix at that time was just lucky to just be part of the journey. This is like a once in 10 20 year event that happens, right? And being part of the journey, I think you just have to be lucky. Right time, right place, right? And that's just what happened with me there.
Yeah. Well, it's an incredible story. And even with all the right time and the right place, there was still ups and downs and challenges. But I guess that's really just business. Every day you wake up, there's new opportunities and new challenges, and it's never a straight line to get to the end. When we look at businesses, we think, what problem can be solved in the market? And then if you can build a product or service that's good enough, clients will actually pay for it.
Yep.
When we talk about the problem you're solving today at Orcus, walk us through a little bit about what that is and really what problem are you solving?
Yeah. So the gist of it, we enable developers to build applications, right? So applications that are typically distributed, it drives the back end, and more often than not, this is also running the core of your business, right? And as a platform, we provide everything that a full-fledged application developer needs, right? Including high reliability or high performance or high availability, or doing that observability across the stack, and combined with a great debugging and developer experience. But if you look at any company of any size in any space, and generally if you take how the kind of the tech stack is laid out, on the bottom of the stack you would see what is fully ruled by the big three cloud providers today, which is like, how do you manage your infrastructure, right? So nobody starts today thinking about, hey, let's build a data center first, right? They start with one of the big versions of the cloud. So that's the lowest component of that stack that you can think about, right? On the top of the stack is where everyone needs to put their entire focus on. So as a business, you want your best developers, your best people to be in that, because that's what's going to drive the end user experience. That's what is going to take your business and differentiate them from the rest of competition. And you need to go and do things really fast in that layer, right? But to do all of that, what happens in the middle is this platform experience, and not having that platform experience, like, you cannot drive those magical experience in the top, right? And that platform experience, a lot of companies, if you look at 10 years back and how that's evolving, people went and did this themselves, and it's an incredibly hard problem to solve, right? Like, if you start on it today, like, it is, even with the great open source tools across the thing that you have today, and it's going to take you 3 4 years to just get it right, and it is super critical for every business, but these are problems that have been solved over and over and over again, and that's where we come in. And we've been lucky as Conductor as an open source. This has been used by over 3,000 companies worldwide, very battle tested product, and that's where we see that big shift in the developer experience happening. Instead of going and building this from scratch, go and build this using a great product like Conductor, right? So that's really the problem that we are trying to solve. And as a if you want to equate that into in another world, like if you think of if there's a business that has data needs, obviously you want to store data, retrieve data, do all of these things with the database. No one's really today thinking about, I need to build this database from scratch. More often than not, it's like there's all of these choices for me. There's different types of databases, and each database has its use cases that it's strong at, its pros and cons, and then you pick a database for your problem and then go with it. That's the shift that we are seeing right now, and that's what Conductor was built for. And at Orkes as a company, that's really the problem that we're trying to solve.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, there's a lot of platforms out there, and there's a lot of different strategies on getting, into the market, but also aligning yourself with the right partners where you have distribution channels and opportunities to really scale. Talk a little bit about your relationships in the business. Or do you have partnerships that you're aligning with? Is this kind of a direct to market strategy? Go it alone? Like what's working for you?
Yeah, so it's a multi-pronged approach, right? Like, and as a company, we are still very, very early in the journey, right? We are like, a little over 2 years in, 2.5 years in. So we are always learning, what's going to work for us. But I think for every startup, it is very critical that, you always work very, very directly, as much directly as you can with the end customer, because this is a product that we're building. The space is evolving. We are also learning and getting that firsthand experience working with the developers and companies and getting their feedback. That is very important, right? So direct to market is what we really, really focus on, right? So come to the website, go do self sign up, to a POC and do all of that stuff. But it is also important to work with a lot of great partners so that it can help accelerate on the adoption, right? So that's something that there's also some amount of focus on, and we work with some of the companies like Microsoft and Amazon and other channel partners, system integrators, to take this to the next level, and primarily think of that as like, how can we take all of these things and scale ourselves, right? Like use the hyperscalers and scale ourselves as a business, get more customers that way with interesting partnerships, right? Like, but again, like I said, the space is rapidly evolving, and we can see the shift happening. The last 10 years, it's very, very clear, like, where this market is going towards.
Yeah. Why is this important to you?
Being in this developer space, and being a developer myself for 15 20 years, right? I have gone through this journey, back in the day when you know things used to be monolithic in nature, and that was just the way to do things, right? Like, we had companies run their entire business on a big Sun Solaris machine backed by sometimes an Oracle DB, and single point of failures were the way to do things. And slowly that has evolved with companies building data centers and the cloud coming about, and every shift in computing and the way people think about building stuff, right? That's changed with changing dynamics, right? Some of those changing dynamics involve generally what infrastructure is available, right? Like, internet speeds have just gone through the roof. Like if you look at like what we had in the early 2000s to what it is today, like mobile computing has also changed, right? Like the power that you have on mobile devices has also changed, right? And with that, like, the way people think about developing applications also changes. And having been through this journey in a lot of these phases, I truly understand what developers need, what they're looking for, right? And that's really what is passionate for me. Like, problems that I'm interested in, right? And we have built solutions to that ourselves, and then taken that and then applied that to the open source product Conductor, have that battle tested in Netflix, and then over 3,000 companies using it. Now, how do we take it to every developer on the planet, right? That's like the big vision of the company, right? And That's really what kind of drives me, and that's something that we want to do for the next few years.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always something bigger than yourself that actually motivates you oftentimes to build something, whether it's a new figure out on their own. That might be too costly, could be just a time band issue. So really excited to kind of see where this goes. Um, you look in the market and there's a lot of competition. You also see a lot of AI innovation happening. How does your product play into the space of AI?
Yeah, absolutely. So first thing that we are seeing that this thing is real, right? Like, and we are seeing this firsthand with enterprises, right? And when these kind of things happen, again, this is again once in a 10-20 year event, right? Like when you see things like this, and we've seen this, dot-com boom, right? Like, and yes, there were a lot of things that went bust during that time, but also that paved the way for the next set of companies to emerge, right? But one of the things that we're seeing is like, this is real, this is very, very real, and we can see this firsthand with enterprises. And overall, if you look at, like, just the space itself, like how people are envisioning using this and how people are using this, the biggest use case is basically assisting humans, using AI to help humans, just become hyper efficient. What humans could do in, hours and days, now we can do that in, in minutes and seconds. And that's how you can use the power of AI, and then and make yourself more super efficient, just as a person, and then as a business as well, right? And moving forward, one of the things that we're seeing is, when you think of it in that dimension, agents are going to play a really big part, and that's also going to drive the adoption of AI in the market, right? And with that, like that said, like, AI talent is also very, very hard to find today, and there is far less supply for quality AI talent than there is demand. So integrating AI into your new and existing applications without the need of re-architecting your existing application stacks, without the need of having, very focused AI only talent, right? Like that's very important for companies, right? And you want to do this with your existing great engineering talent that you have. And these are all things that we focus on as a company, right? And making it easy for businesses, for developers to use, build the generative AI stuff that the big foundational models like the OpenAIs and the Geminis of the world have come out with, into the new and existing stacks, right? And and focus on things that drive the business. Use that AI to, differentiate your business, and move it far, far ahead of competition, right? That's our general focus on AI. Make it very easy for companies to use AI in their existing stacks into what they're building on, right? Like, and that's really what I focus on as a company with our AI offerings.
Got it. Yeah. Tell me about it. When it comes to AI talent, I mean, you know, a couple years ago, that was 10% of our customer base. Today, it's 100%. And it's, AI companies growing, scaling, trying to find the right people. And it's not easy. And there's a lot of now, training as a priority to get existing engineers up to speed on machine learning or different aspects of technology that they can be valuable at. So there's,
Yep.
yeah, this is, I think, a global problem now. It's not necessarily just in the U.S., but it's also, everywhere we're working with companies, and it's pretty fascinating. It is very similar to the dot-com boom from the perspective that there's a lot of companies. I think the number I heard was something like 1,500 AI startups launching every week right now, and just the ideas behind what's going to happen is, I think, very real. I mean, co-pilots across every industry, if you want to look at it that way, or just technologies that are helping optimize, your business, do more with less, use computers to really help automate a lot more than we've done in the past. So we see a trend and we see real business opportunity behind it. This is that next big transformation, and excited to kind of hear where you're at and how you're contributing to that. Um,
Yeah, and then talking about that, like, we also have a great relationship and partnership with Microsoft, and earlier this year we also got a chance to meet Satya Nadella and privately demo on what we are doing, right? And he was super excited to look at and all the agent work that we are doing, and very well aligned with Microsoft vision as well. So that was like a great testament coming from him, and also that, hey, the industry is kind of generally moving in this direction. That's also what they are seeing, right? But that said, like, you just talked about talent, right? Like, Ilya from OpenAI, right? And most of the work that has been out today, like, obviously ChatGPT was the first thing that was, exposed to the world, and, the world got a chance to kind of use firsthand of how LLMs and AI work and generative AI stuff, right? Like, most of the work was, by one paper that was kind of written by him in 2017 around work around transformers. And, that's how hard, like, AI talent is, right? And this is going to be a challenge moving forward, right? Like, so I believe, like, hey, foundational models, like, that's going to be ruled by two or three or four big companies, right? And, what happens on the top of that is kind of where other leading AI startups and that's really what we are focused on as well.
Well, we're also seeing a lot of acqui-hires where it's not necessarily just the product. It's we can't hire those people, those 3 engineers that are founders and their 10 other engineers they were able to bring on board. So let's just buy that company, and now we have that talent, and we're seeing a lot of that start to happen too. So whether you're a small startup and thinking and it's you against the world, and you've got these behemoths that are helping shape the world, but also maybe not give you an opportunity, there could be an opportunity of an easy acquisition. We're hearing this, within months of starting companies and getting pretty large buyouts. So kind of crazy what we're seeing. It's very similar to the dot-com boom that we also did go through. Um, if you look at your company today, I know you're 2 years in and you're growing. If you succeed in what you're building, who's going to be the biggest benefiter or benefactor from this?
That's 100% going to be the developer, right? Developers who are focused on building the applications that drive the backend, and sometimes it would be developers that is building stuff, what we call as at the backend for your front ends, right? Like, that's really the biggest benefactor from an individual perspective, right? But the business itself, right? Like, now you can put your best developers on your end user facing problems, right? So moving fast, right? Like the developers, and then generally the business itself, right? And you can draw parallels that with what happened in the cloud, right? Because the cloud made it so easy for people to go and deploy stuff. It helped it in two ways, right? Capital investment was not needed for taking a startup off the ground, right? Because you didn't have to think about building data centers anymore, right? You could start with one of the big three cloud providers, and the tooling that came on the top of that enabled developers to build and deploy new applications, right? You didn't have to think about doing this yourself all the time. Like, the basic constructs came from coming today from the cloud providers. You just use that and build that, and just like that, just like how they build the and manage the infrastructure layer, we are just solving the exact same problem, but one layer above that, which is building application platforms, right? Like, so really, that's developers what really is going to be the biggest benefactor.
Got it. How big is this market when you think about the total addressable market, the TAM?
Yeah. So if you think about how, and I think I talked earlier on about the thinking about the technical stack, right? Like, bottom of the layer, the infrastructure management completely ruled by cloud providers today, primarily the big three. And, a layer above that, platform, application platform building, enabling developers to build these great applications is what really that we are focused on, the orchestration space. And a very easy way to look at it is, if you look at any company's cloud bill, 20% of that is for infrastructure, right? Like, the bare bones, the bare metal, machines that you're kind of, getting, your database infrastructures, your the very low level stuff, right? Memory, compute, networks, right? That's 20% of your cloud bill, right? On the top of that is two more layers, and the platform layer, the application building layer, that's like 40% of cloud spends, right? And then obviously the end user facing, that's another 40%. So this opportunity, when you look at it that way, this is as big as the cloud itself, right? And it's been close to 20 years, right, since the cloud came out, like 15, 20 years. And there are tons of companies that are still in data centers working through that cloud migration journey, right? Like, and so that is just going to grow and grow. So this is as big, if not much bigger than the cloud itself. And that's also what is like very, very exciting, because as a startup to be successful, you want to solve a problem that is relevant to the industry. You want that problem space to be really big, and you want to have this TAM also that's like huge, right? Like, and we are just lucky to have all of this come together for us, and now the onus is on us to go and execute, right? So that's super interesting and exciting space for us to be in. So I would say, see, for any startup, right, like especially early phase, you know, 2 years in, 3 years in, right, like a lot of companies are focusing on product market fit, and that's where they're thinking about investing more, scaling up. Like, but product market fit is a sign that people always look for, right? Where is that going to come from? Like, and what you think is the right solution, or where you think, or how you think that the market is going to be using you is probably not the way that you have probably started doing this, right? So, but we've been just lucky because we have seen product market in open source, and replicating that in our enterprise offering is the challenge that we constantly work on, right? And you can see that when you see this wild hockey stick growth, right? And when I talk about growth, it's not the 3x or 4x growth that you think that like a really well managed SaaS companies think about today. But this is like as growth as big as the cloud itself, right? Like, and that's where we really want to be, and we aspire to be. Something that AWS started to see maybe 2-3 years after they initially launched, right? Like, so that's one thing that we are constantly trying to find where that thing is, right? The other thing I would say is, you know, obviously as building company, like, people in the company, especially the founding team, we are doing this thing for the first time sometimes, right? And so working through distractions and keeping the focus on the company's vision, that is very, very critical. And that's also been a constant challenge. And, distractions could come from anywhere, right? It could be stuff like people, like competition, or funding, or it could be a multitude of things. So, but working through the distractions, but helping the company keep that focus on that long-term company vision, that's a constant challenge, right? And building a great team is another one, I would say, right? Like, and at every stage in the company, like, you need a different kind of skill, right? So hiring the right kind of people, that's a constant challenge that we're going to have. I think all startups are going to go through this, right? Like, so I would say, not one single challenge, but like, these are the few things that's been coming up all the time, right? Like, but keeping focus on that vision, keep the distractions aside, like, I think that's something that's probably going to be the biggest challenge, and that's really what takes, like, companies forward, right? Like, if you get distracted in things that are not important in the company, like, you're wasting your time and money and resources. Like, keeping that focus on that long-term company vision, right? That's very, very important.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Who are your customers, and is it driving revenue opportunities? And as you're focused around those two areas, going to market, making sure your message is right, getting buy-in from the customer, and then being able to sell a product that actually is profitable for the company. At the end of the day, it's how you survive. So you got to be got to be able to do
Yeah.
those things. When you go into the market, who are you selling to? Is it the developer teams? Is it the VP of engineering, the CIO, the CTO? Who's getting your ear when you pitch your product?
Yeah, so I think what you're also asking, another way to put this is also like, what's our ideal customer profile? Like, whom do we focus on?
Yeah.
What's the messaging, right? So, I've talked about the space and the problem that we are trying to solve in general. And there is three interesting personas for us, right? One is our end user, and that's the software developer, right? Like the programmer who kind of uses this day in, day out, right? So that's one interesting persona. So there, our messaging is like, what's the value add to the developer? What do they get out of this? Like, and how does this help make them super efficient, and get them to focus on solving problems that is most important in the business, right? Like, and leverage tools like Conductor, which has already seen this before, right? So that's one interesting persona, right? The second one is the buyer, and because this is a very developer focused product, more often than not, like this a buyer comes from the engineering org, and depending upon the size of the org, that persona is either a CTO, VP of engineering, or a senior director of engineering, and so on and so forth. But we also play into the whole process orchestration space, right? So instead of general application building, application orchestration, sometimes people look at this as, for example, our if you look at the verticals that we are focused on, or where a lot of customers are come in, it's also the financial world. And for example, payment processing is a really, really big use case for us, right? And that's a solution that people use to solve problems, right? So and when you think about it that way, or modernizing your tech stack, for example, so some of these things are which the business have to say that, hey, this is something that as a business that we are focused on, we have this budget approved, and some of those things could come even from the CIO level, CSO level, or the CEO level directly, right? So it depends on what the consumer eventually uses us for, but more often than not, engineering side. The third and also very important persona is the enterprise architect. So this product, like I said, it's used by the developer, but this is a very collaborative product that we have built, which means that this is not like a developer uses this for himself or herself. This is also a product that people are collaborating with. So it's a product that is sold into the company. It's a license, and everyone in the company goes a chance and gets a chance to go and use this, right? Which means there is one or two people in the company sometimes, or in an organization, who is actually putting their neck on the line to say that I'm going to be using Conductor, I'm going to be using Orkes to solve the solution. This is going to run the core of my business, and this is an important decision that we probably not going to change for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And that persona is the enterprise architect, right? Like, and the value add that we sell to them is also very different from the value add that goes to a developer or to a buyer, right? So as persona wise, these are the three interesting ones that comes to mind, more often than not.
Yeah. How easy is the product to install or implement? Oftentimes we just try and understand high level, like visually walk us through what you're going through if you can. I know it's probably fairly complex, but maybe in the simplest terms, is it a dashboard you're logging into that's connecting to different data sets, or like what? Just walk us through really what it is, look what it's like.
Yeah. So let me maybe take a kind of a real world example, right? So if you're trying to build like a retail company, right? And as a company grows bigger, there are probably different orgs, right? There's one company, or there's this one organization within the company that's listing a bunch of products. There's probably another team that is working on pricing, that is focused on cost-based pricing or value-based pricing or competitive-based pricing. So there's some services that manage pricing. Then there is some other services that probably do this, make the sale happen, do the payment processing, and then finally the shipping and returns and stuff like that, right? And all of these services have to come together to give that excellent end user experience, right? And that's typically driven by an API if you are a B2B company, or if you're a consumer facing company like Amazon, that's probably through an app or through a website. And now you have this multiple services in the company. Now, how do you stitch all of these things together? And that's where a thing like a platform, like an orchestrator comes in, right? And that's where we really play into, right? Now, so there's few steps here. One is, you as a company, you are trying to pick the right language for the right problem that you're trying to solve, right? So within a company itself, you might see multiple language stacks. You might have a combination of Java or Golang that you use for building a backend applications, Python for doing ML related or data related stuff, right? And then you might have multiple different language stacks that you have, right? And that's where, as a developer, you're writing your core business logic, and that's where all developers in the company should be focused on, writing business logic that is really driving your business app, right? Now, then there is this whole concept of stitching things together. Back in the pre-orchestrated days, in the pre-conductor days, these are all written by some other team which build their own service, and all this service was doing is calling into the other services that you build in the company. And then very often you would hit this very interesting problem very early on, where you had more services than people in the company, and all these services were solving the exact same kind of problems, like how do you deal with failures, how do you deal with high reliability, right? If one service fails, whose responsibility is to take it to completion, right? Like, that's where this product like Conductor really comes in, right? So think about how, as a business, or as an engineering process, how that end to end looks like. Build that out in Conductor. The pieces in that becomes the services that you write code for in whatever language of your choice. Connect that to the orchestrator, and then when the orchestrator gets involved, gets invoked, the right service gets called in at the right time. Failure handling, all of the other common problems that I talked about, which you used to write services before, now is completely taken care of by Conductor, right? So that's the your day one proposition. Now, as your business evolves, you're going to launch in multiple geos in multiple states sometimes. The business is probably going to be slightly different, right? So how do you version your process over time, right? Like these are all things that kind of the orchestrator itself builds on. But then at scale on your day 100, your operational excellence is very, very key. Like you now you have, thousands of customers, millions of customers, making so many orders every day. Even a very tiny 0.01% failure rate can be a lot of money, a lot of debugging overhead for your engineers. It's very critical for your operation. That's where the end-to-end observability thing comes into play. And having that out of the box with a system like Orkes, right? That's something that we provide as well. So think of this as, I'm building a great platform. I'm building something for the end user. Give me the end-to-end developer experience, right? And that's really what like something like Orkes really provides.
Well, that's great. And I know that there's a really good overview of that too on your website, which is an animation and kind of walks you through exactly how it works, which I think, paints a really good picture there too. What's the biggest breakthrough so far that you've had as the company, whether it's yourself or as an organization, 2 years into the business?
Yeah, I would say the opportunity personally for me, I think like the opportunity for something like this is very, very hard to get. First of all, like a great product that's already battle tested with the open source, then having a great team to work with, right, on a vision that we are all aligned on. And then the next big thing is like, hey, this is all great, but the industry also should be looking for this as a solution, and that you want that problem space to be really large as well. So the TAM should be really big. So having all of these things come together, that's something that and having the opportunity to work and lead that effort, like I'm really, really grateful for that and what we have achieved for so far. But again, this is very, very early on as a company, right? And I'm super excited about the opportunity in front of us, right? But as a company, you know, it was very surprising to say, and also great and lucky also to see large enterprise companies come in early on when we had just launched, come in early on and buy and use Orcas much before we had our PLG motions in place. And for most of the SaaS companies, it's the other way around. Like they try to build a PLG motion, take that, or try to put your, sales folks on it, and figure out the value adds, and put the value propositions and convert them into large enterprises. We had the reverse problem, right? Like we started to get really large enterprises very, very early on. That's really hard for a lot of companies to break through, and I believe the open source platform had a lot to do with that. But more importantly, I think the problem space that we are solving for has had also a lot to do with that, right? So that I would say was probably the single biggest breakthrough.
Yeah, that's amazing. Talk a little bit about the open source strategy, because a lot of companies start with just taking an idea and they build a product go to market. Going the open source pathway, what should others be thinking about if they were to go down that route?
Yeah, so I don't think there is a one solution fits all, right? And the open source strategy has also changed from the early Linux days to what it is today. So if you look at like a company like Red Hat, their strategy was very simple, right? Like Linux is a great operating system. It is free, it is reliable, it does a lot of great things, but no enterprise is going to be using it without awesome support. And Red Hat just focused on that. Like, they built some great tooling on the top of Linux and provided end-to-end enterprise support, right? That was their business model, provide support, right? Moving on, as more and more open source projects came into play, and there was this big, I would say, I think in the 2000s, 2010s to 2015, a ton of great open source projects came out in the industry. lot of them were under the Apache 2.0 license, moving into Apache Foundations. And the whole idea of that, a ton of them came from Netflix itself, right? And companies around the world. And there it was like, hey, how do you get, here's a great open source product started by a company, give that to the world because these are problems that everyone wants to solve for, get a lot of contributions from the community and take it to the next level, and then have a foundation model, maybe to take that to the next level, get a lot of participants from that, and then think of this as either as a support model, like it make it easy for you to deploy. And that's what companies focused on. Hey, here's an open source we worked on. Now it's out in the world. We know this product really well. We will help you operationalize that, right? And the last few years, that's changed one more level. They're saying it is not just about taking and operationalizing this and taking off that heavy lifting of getting this operational overhead from your engineers and DevOps. This is basically also saying, hey, you know, what is that differentiator that you're going to create on an enterprise level, that is really going to take your company forward, right? So there's a challenge between, and that you talked about strategy. There's a challenge between, this came from open source. It's a lot of developer community that contributed to that. Now, as you're building more and more stuff, how do you give back and what do you give back to the community, right? And so our strategy has been very simple. Anything that is developer facing, right, that is of immense value to the developer, that helps go and developer create like great applications with ease, solving their day-to-day problems. That's really what goes back into open source all the time. And that's the strategy. I don't think it's going to change for the next few years. um, the operational points that we have on the top, what does it take to give this high reliability stuff, and there are things which customers are focused on, because sometimes customers are in data centers, sometimes they are in one version of the cloud. How do you give a great operational experience for these companies, right? Like anything that is operational in nature helps them run. Think about security and governance, compliance, and sometimes really high performance stuff, right? And focused on, hey, I'm not really interested about open sourcing the components that make it, but I just want to use that, right? And that's really what our enterprise play is. And the set of differentiating factors that enterprises really need when they need to run, not really the developer needs when they're building this application. So that's been our focus on how we differentiate that out, right? And there's, some companies sometimes think about this from the licensing perspective, and there are sometimes small gray areas, and those gray areas are subject to change. And as the industry evolves, we'll also adapt and evolve. But giving back to the developer, that's generally been our focus, from a strategy perspective.
Got it. Really cool to hear that. Have a couple more questions here, and we're going to wrap up. But what do you know now that you wish someone would have told you when you started the company that you think would be valuable for the listeners to hear?
Yeah, I think this thing is never easy. In fact, there's a lot of hurdles and hard work that goes into this. A lot of them can be, and they are non-technical. And as founders and as people who want to build and do startups, a lot of what you see in the news are usually the happy path stories. A lot of startups fail, multitude of reasons, right? Like focusing on the wrong problems. Maybe sometimes it's founders not getting along well, sometimes it's just not aligning together as a company, and sometimes not doing pivots and shifts that's important. But startups are just extremely challenging to take off, and every day it's a different day with a new set of challenges, much more that you can ever think of, right? And so startups are not for everyone, and it's a very very long journey that you're signing up for. And you will need a lot of help and support from the people around you, and the team that you're building will also have to do a lot of, they'll have to do a lot with the success of the company as well. But having said that, there is nothing more exciting that I would want to than the thing that I'm doing today, right? The problems that we are trying to solve. And every day is a new day. The startup every day is an exciting day. But if this is something that you built for, startups, I think there's anything better that I would want to do.
Yeah, really cool to hear that. We hear that a lot, actually, and it's exciting to see the ones that make it, and even the ones that don't. Learnings that come out of it. I've heard that even if you don't make it as a startup founder, probably the worst failure you could have is not apply that to your next startup. You get knocked down, you get back up, and you have a new idea, you try again until that. So that's one thing that we've seen others that have gone through that have made a couple uh, failures come out and really they know exactly how to do it differently, and that's a real value there. You're not going to get from a school. As you look into 2000 for the second half and going into 2025, anything exciting on the roadmap that you can share?
Yeah, so I think this is also feedback that we are getting from the industry is in today's world, everyone wants to use AI into their existing applications. So first of all, we have this awesome platform, Conductor, that people are able to leverage, and we are seeing some great early evidence, right? So there's one focus that we're going to focus on that, and getting every company on the planet to go and use this thing, primarily because the TAM is really, really big. And the other big revolutionary stuff that we want to do is a startup, like, you also don't want to do like, incremental changes. Like, what's going to take you to the next level is this big revolutionary changes that you want to kind of build and give to the world. And in today's world, everyone wants to use AI, right? So the whole thing about building agents, like, helping companies build this stuff with ease, leveraging the power of Gen AI into their applications, but using the foundational models that the great companies provide, but integrating that very, very easily into your existing applications, or as you're building new applications. That's really one of the big focuses that we have, and there's a bunch of exciting things that's going to come out very, very soon. So look forward to that.
Yeah, really cool. Well, Jew, it's been great to talk with you and understand a little bit more about not just your origin story, but the company that you're building, Orcus, and where it's going. If anyone wants to find you or find Orcus, where do they go?
Yeah, so go to orcus.io. That's our website. There's several ways on the listed at the bottom of the of the page to just how to reach us. But you can connect to me on LinkedIn directly if you want to reach out, and happy to talk more.
Very cool. All right. Well, thanks so much for coming on and sharing your story, and to all the listeners for listening. It means a lot to me that you spent your time with us today. I'm your host, Jake Aaron Villarreal, signing off for now, but can't wait to catch up with you all on the next episode. Until then, take care. Before we wrap up, I want to give a big shout out to all the entrepreneurs that have joined to make this podcast possible. And for all the listeners for listening. It means the world to me that you chose to spend your time with us today. I'm your host, Jake Aaron Villarreal, signing off for now, but can't wait to connect with you all soon on the next episode. Take care. This show is sponsored by Match Relevant, a company that helps venture-backed startups find the best people in the market, and they do it in 3 simple steps. First, they sit down with founders to understand their story. Second, they tell their story into multiple candidate channels. And third, they schedule interviews within 48 hours. Find us at matchrelevant.com to learn more about how we do it.